Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic here with another live tune-up. I'm over on Twitch right now at twitch.tv/Commander Mechanic. I'll be doing these live tune-ups every Monday for the next little while, so be sure to join me and get able to see us do this while we're doing it live. Be able to get your input and your opinion seen and taken into our edits as well. This week we've got our first viewer submitted deck for a live tune-up. This deck in particular comes from Marc Lausen. Marc writes as follows: I'm looking to tune up my Nadier Sidar token deck. Okay, the deck aims to build Nadier cheaply. Okay, pump up toughness, pump up power and toughness so that we can get that effect, and we'll take a look at what these commanders do in just a second. And either blink or sacrifice Nadier to make more tokens. So that right there gives us a few goals to work with. He also adds, I'm mostly wondering if I'm going in too many different directions with the deck, and also, importantly, wants us to stick to modern-only cards. In particular, modern frame-only cards, which is Mirrodin Forward in this instance, just because Marc doesn't have a lot of older cards or a lot of access to older cards. Very easy workaround here, very easy restriction on deck building. But let's take a look at Marc's list together, shall we? So here we have a Sidar Kondo Nadier Agent of Dusknell partner deck. Sidar is a really interesting green-white commander from the original two-color commander pairings. Sidar has flanking. Flanking just makes creatures that block him one power toughness smaller, but also says creatures your opponents control without flying or reach can't block creatures power 2 or less. This is the best effect here because this effect affects all opponents, but it doesn't affect you. Meaning your opponent's creatures that attack other opponents can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach if their power is 2 or less. This is a great little political tool as it encourages opponents to attack each other with their nigh unblockable creatures. Okay, but it basically makes your smaller creatures, power 2 or less, unblockable except by flying and reach creatures. Really, really interesting, especially for a token deck where most of the stuff that we're going to make is going to be on the smaller side. Nadier, on the other hand, is a 6-mana 3/3. Not exactly a great return on investment right away until you read Nadier's abilities here. Whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, not necessarily dies, but leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Nadier. When Nadier leaves the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to its power. Okay, so like we were told by the submitting viewer, we want to pump Nadier's power in different ways, whether it be +1/+1 counters, whether it be equipment, anything that makes that power higher means when Nadier leaves the battlefield, we get extra tokens. And that's really important. All right, so let's take a look at the initial list. And I see some definite concerns here. So the submitting viewer, Marc here, Marc had some concerns about going in too many different directions with the deck. Okay, and we can see that with some of the cards included in the deck. First of all, if this is a tokens deck, there are far too many non-token creatures in the deck. All right, and I'm just going to turn on mana, not group. We're going to turn on mana cost. That's what we're going to turn on. Okay, so there are far too many non-token creatures in the deck, and especially creatures that don't make tokens as well. Going through the list, there's only a handful of creatures that actually make tokens. Chatterfang makes tokens when you make tokens. Okay? Woe Strider makes tokens on ETB. Kalitas makes tokens when a creature dies. These are all great. Pitiless Plunderer makes treasures. And it's important to note that Nadier only cares about tokens leaving the battlefield, not necessarily token creatures. So treasure tokens leaving the battlefield pump up our commander. Okay, so that's very important to note. All right, but apart from that, we don't have a lot that makes tokens. We've got Ghoulcaller Gisa, which sacrifices to make higher power creatures. We've got Thalis that makes spirits when we create tokens. We've got Brood Monitor, Wormcoil Engine, and Mere Battlesphere. So right there, of these 26 creatures in the deck, I rhymed off maybe 6 or 7 that actually make tokens. And that's not a lot for a deck that wants to make tokens. So one of the first things that I do is I would readdress that pretty considerably. All right, let's take a look at the rest of the deck. Sorceries, not a lot of ways to make tokens in here as well. In fact, none of our sorceries make tokens. Okay, in terms of instants, we've got stuff that blinks, which is great with Nadier, but honestly, stuff that just sacrifices tokens, not making new tokens. We aren't going to beast within our own stuff. We might tend the pests to make some tokens, but we aren't honestly making a volume of tokens here. And that's a shame. It's rough. We're going to end up wanting to make tokens and not being able to in this deck, and that feels bad. When we want to do the thing, but we're not able to, we're going to find ourselves in a rough spot. All right. We've got Skull Clamp, which can kill off our tokens. Great. Fantastic. Okay. We've got Nim Deathmantle. Great way to pump Nadier, but honestly doesn't make tokens. Okay. Dragon Throne of Tarkir, Eldrazi Monument. Great things to do to make smaller creatures larger, but honestly, none of that makes tokens. Even with our enchantments, right? We've got stuff like Dreadhorde Invasion, which will make us a token a turn, or will make that amassed zombie one bigger. This doesn't make us a volume of tokens. And with our aristocrat pieces in here, being able to sacrifice one token a turn isn't great. Awakening Zone makes us one token a turn. Bastion of Remembrance makes us a token on ETB, and then is an aristocrat effect. You can see here we aren't making a volume of tokens. Okay. In addition, we have stuff like Mirari's Wake, which is going to make our smaller creatures, especially things like 2/2 zombie tokens, big enough that they aren't going to benefit from Sidar's ability. We want to stay under that 2 power mark with the creatures in the deck. That means that we are going to want to go wide as opposed to tall in this deck. So Mark's initial thought here is incredibly accurate. He's just going too many different ways with this deck. Okay? With some of the cards in this deck, let me know, chat, what you think so far. All right, you can check this out on my Moxfield profile too, so that you can take a look live as I'm updating this. Let me make sure that this is going to be listed as well, so you can head over to my Moxfield profile and take a look. All right, the land base is fantastic. Okay, this is the one area that I don't want to touch overly much. We've got a lot of great stuff in here for an Abzan color pairing. We've got a couple of our ally color fetches, even some enemy color fetches in here. We've got some shock lands. We've got a Triome. Exactly what we want. However, you can see one of the things that we don't have is the ability to make colorless mana. And that's important for one inclusion in particular, and that is our friend over here, Eldrazi Displacer. So we're making a lot of colored mana, but we aren't making any colorless mana. Eldrazi Displacer is great with Nadier, don't get me wrong. You want to flicker him to be able to make the tokens equal to his power, but we just don't have the colorless mana to be able to do that. We don't have a lot of colorless mana generation when it comes to our artifacts. We've got Soul Ring, and we've got stuff that we can sacrifice to Ashnod's Altar, but apart from that, we're lacking colorless mana. So unfortunately, I think unless we're reworking that mana base, I think Eldrazi Displacer is one of our first cuts here. All right. Now, one of the things that I see in this deck is a sneaky little combo. All right. And at least part of a sneaky little combo. We've got Nim Deathmantle, and we've got Ashnod's Altar in the list. Okay. With Nim Deathmantle and Ashnod's Altar, if we have a creature that enters the battlefield and creates 2 tokens with it, we can go infinite. How does that work? Well, let's say we've got something like Brood Monitor. When Brood Monitor enters the battlefield, we make 3 Eldrazi Scions. All right? What we do is we sacrifice Brood Monitor and one of the Scions to Ashnod's Altar to make 4 colorless mana, and we get to activate the Nim Deathmantle. So when the Brood Monitor dies, we can pay 4 to return it to the battlefield with that 4 colorless mana. And when Brood Monitor returns, it makes 3 more tokens, and we end up netting 2 1/1 Eldrazi Scions for every loop that we do. That makes us infinite creatures. All right? One of the things that we can do with this is just go wide. We can do that at instant speed. So we can wait until the end of the turn of the opponent before us and pop off with Brood Monitor and make an infinitely wide army that with Sidar is unblockable. Easy enough, right? 3-card combo, 3.5 with our commander to make everything blockable, but when you go infinitely wide, you don't particularly need that unblockable, do you? So 3-card combo there. Really interesting, and one of the off valves to a game with this deck. One of the very common ways to enable this combo or to work with this combo is with a creature like Grave Titan. Grave Titan makes 2 zombies with it. And I'll pull that up. Grave Titan makes 2 zombies with it. I think it's a classic. Everybody should know what it does. So what happens is you sacrifice the Grave Titan and one of the 2/2 zombies to Ashnod's Altar to make 4 colorless mana. Then you return Grave Titan to the battlefield with that activated ability of Nim Deathmantle, making 2 more zombies with it. And you end up making an infinitely large number of zombies. Okay, so I think that it's a shoo-in in this deck. It does what we want it to do, and it makes 2/2 zombies and can continue making 2/2 zombies every turn. So even if we don't have a combo, the value floor on it is that it continues making us unblockable creatures, essentially, right? Not only is it a big 6/6, but it makes a bunch of zombies whenever it enters and whenever it attacks. All right, so I'd like to add it in right away. Now, some of the other things that we have in here lean very much into the Aristocrats theme. All right, and Mark mentioned that he wanted the Aristocrats theme in here, but we no, B, we don't have a sub button yet. I haven't made affiliate yet. Get more people in here and I might. One of the things that we want to do is enable this Aristocrats theme. And we can't do that quite yet with the volume or lack of volume of tokens that we're making. So while I talk a little bit more about what's included in this deck, let me know in chat what your favorite volume of creature token makers are, enablers are, so that we can continue to go wide with this as opposed to tall. Hey Mike, good to see you. Thanks fam for coming out. Great. So some of the inclusions in here are about going taller rather than going wider. And I want to cut those out because we want to attack with smaller creatures, unblockable creatures, as opposed to larger creatures. All right, so Drana, Liberator of Malakir, I think is another cut, because going taller with Drana means that our smaller creatures are very quickly going to exceed that 2 power limit from Sidar, making them blockable once again. All right, so let's cut that. So let's cut Drana there. Along the same note, we've got Mirari's Wake, and while Mirari's Wake is fantastic for increasing our mana generation, it's going to make our creatures bigger. Specifically things like 2/2s, whether they are 2/2 beasts or 2/2 zombies or whatever they might be. If we get them up over that 2 power limit, they're going to be blockable, and we want to eliminate that. I'd like to lean further into treasure token generation as opposed to doubling our land production to get our mana value up, because Nadier does trigger when treasures are sacrificed. So let's cut that. All right, we've got Smothering Tithe in the deck. It's a classic. I think everybody's aware of that. If you've got a Smothering Tithe, throw a Smothering Tithe in. It's a staple at this point, but I always advocate removing these staples if your deck functions without it. I think the synergy here is worth including it. However, there is one card that I think should go in any deck that has to do with tokens, and that is Revel in Riches. So Revel in Riches, 5 mana enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you create a treasure. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasure tokens, you just plain win the game. All right? If we are making treasures like we want to do, we're leaning into our primary synergy, but Revel in Riches gets us closer to winning a game. So I think that it's a good include in here as well. All right, we've got a few other great recommendations in chat for token generation, specifically Adeline. Adeline is one of my favorite cards printed in 2021, hands down, and one of the best white commanders we've seen in a long time. Adeline makes you at least 3 1/1 human tokens every turn. Adeline says she's a star 4 with power equal to the number of creatures you control. If you're going wide, Adeline's going to get very, very big, very, very fast, which is fantastic. Makes her a threat on her own. The biggest benefit of Adeline is that whenever you attack, not with Adeline, but at all, and Adeline's on the battlefield, you make a 1/1 tapped and attacking creature for each opponent you control. With Sidar, that token is unblockable. If those tokens aren't unblockable, if Sidar's not out, and they end up dying, then they make a great way to get more counters on Nadier as well. Great question from chat. What do I think is a great counter to Adeline? I think a great counter to Adeline is being able to chump those 1/1s is a great way to do it. Just make sure that you aren't getting that chip damage in. But removing Adeline over and over again is fantastic as well. If you've got something that can block Adeline profitably, something with First Strike, for instance, if you can get up to 4 power, then Adeline, you really take the teeth out of it. A good Adeline player will stop attacking with Adeline until she's got some evasion on her if you don't have any profitable attacks. But again, I think it's fantastic. Hey DW, fantastic to see you, first time chatter. Thanks for coming out. We're just taking a look at this Sidar Kondo and Nadier Agent of Dusknell deck. So we've just added Adeline in, which is great. There are a few other creatures that I'd like to cut at this point, though. Sakura Tribe Elder, while a staple in the format and incredibly well-loved, just generally versatile, I think is in the wrong spot in this deck. We've got a handful of 1-mana dorks already, and Sakura Tribe Elder is taking up a valuable 2-mana slot. I know a lot of people say, I don't like running too many 1-mana dorks because If there's a board wipe, I get set back on my ramp. Very, very valid point. However, we've got enough ways in this deck to ramp, and our curve is low enough, capping out at 6 or 7, and only a handful of cards. In fact, our curve right now is right around the 3 mana value mark, which is where we want to be. I think that Sakura Tribe Elder can go. We've got a few other Aristocrats pieces in here. Cruel Celebrant, Corpse Knight, Zulaport, Cutthroat. That's what you want to be doing on 2. Okay? You want to be playing one of these enablers on 2 in order to get this rolling, right? Having some of your other enablers like Adeline and Chatterfang at 3 is great, especially when Adeline lands down and you can attack with maybe one of these 1/1s that you have, these 1-drop 1/1s, and start making a bunch of tokens. Fantastic. All right. Sloth Bear Michaeloth is a fantastic one. Tendershoot Dryad. We'll take a look at a couple of these too. All right. So one of the big win cons in the deck, apart from going wide, is our non-combat win con. And that is Nadier's Nightblade. So Nadier's Nightblade pairs with Nadier very, very well, but says whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Okay? So we can combine this as an Aristocrats piece. So like Cruel Celebrant, draining opponents and gaining you life, like Zulaport Cutthroat, draining opponents and gaining you life. We can use Nadier's Nightblade along the same lines to drain opponents and gain us life, but it works for all kinds of tokens, not just creatures like our other Aristocrats pieces. So if we start making treasures, for instance, we can sacrifice those to make us mana, naturally, but to also drain the table. So this pairs really well with Revel in Riches, for instance, or it pairs really well with Pitiless Plunderer. In particular, we can use Pitiless Plunderer and Chatterfang to start rolling really, really well. If we've got Chatterfang, Pitiless Plunderer, and a Sack Outlet, we've got Infinite as well. Okay, how does that work? So, Pitiless Plunderer makes you a treasure every time a creature you control dies. Chatterfang makes you a squirrel whenever you create a token. Okay, easy enough. If we've got a Viscera Seer and we make 1 token of any kind, Chatterfang makes us a squirrel. If we sacrifice that squirrel to Viscera Seer to scry 1, Pitiless Plunderer makes us a treasure token. On making that treasure token, Chatterfang makes us another squirrel. We can then sacrifice the squirrel to make another treasure, to make another squirrel. And it replaces itself over and over and over again. That ends up with infinite treasures. And thanks to Viscera Seer as our sack outlet here, that would get us infinite scries. Meaning we can go look for the card that we want on top of our library and just simply keep it there. Or find a way to draw it so that we can get our win con in place. All right? If our sack outlet is instead an Ashnod's Altar, for instance, that's infinite mana right there. Infinite colorless mana. Or infinite colored mana if we're making those treasure tokens as well. And infinite colorless mana. It goes big, right? So there's another sneaky little combo in this deck. And I think that between those 2 combos and Revel in Riches, we have enough combat win cons and non-combat win cons in this deck. We just want to amp up the synergies at this level. Right? Does that make sense? Okay? And we just want to make the gears move that much smoother. So let's take a look at how we do that. With these pieces in place, these value pieces in place, we want to take a look at synergy pieces. So everything else should be our Aristocrats enablers, like Poison Tip Archer. Okay? Yeheni, Undying Partisan, is a way to ensure that everybody else's stuff dying builds up our creatures. Okay? Disciple of Bolas, we aren't going tall any longer. And Disciple of Bolas lets us sacrifice a creature to gain life and draw cards. Lord. Disciple of Bolas lets us sacrifice creatures to gain life and draw cards. And we just are not having a large creature that we can sacrifice at this point. So I think Disciple of Bolas is a fine cut here. We're going to want to find ways to draw cards within the deck as well, because we've got life gain through our Aristocrats pieces. We've got ways to make our commander that much larger. It's drawing cards that's going to be a concern. Okay, I think Kalidas is another great way. Value when opponent stuff dies. Teysa Karlov, double death triggers. This is an enhancer. Okay, so on its own, Teysa doesn't do anything in your deck. Okay, you don't have any dies triggers apart from, not even Nadier, because Nadier isn't a dies trigger. Nadier is a leaves the battlefield trigger. So you don't have anything in the deck that just works with Teysa on her own. Teysa hitting the battlefield, unless you've got your other pieces in play already, is only going to make things work faster, not make them work better. So she's not going to get you to your win con. She's not going to do anything on your own apart from making your creatures have vigilance, your token creatures have vigilance and lifelink. Is that worth it in this deck? If we're going wide, it might be. Especially if you want to be able to block your opponent's incoming creatures, having vigilance and lifelink. So the double death triggers part of this Teysa, I mean, that's typically what Teysa is used for. In this case, we want to use Teysa more for that vigilance and lifelink. And at 4 mana, she's on the cusp, right? She's just barely there, right? Ghoul-Caller Gisa is another creature that wants us to go tall, okay? We can pay black and sacrifice another creature to create X 2/2 black zombies, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. The only creature that's going to be large enough that we want to sacrifice to Ghoul-Caller Gisa is Nadier. We aren't going to want to sacrifice Grave Titan or Wormcoil Engine to Ghoul-Caller Gisa. We're going to want to sacrifice smaller stuff. Sacrifice a zombie to make 2 more zombies for 5 mana and that activation cost might not be worth it. All right, so Ghoul-Caller Gisa for me is right on the cusp here of a cut. Okay, Sidisi Undead Vizier is a tutor on a stick. I think that that's perfectly fine, especially when we've got tokens that we're going to sacrifice to exploit Sidisi and lets us go and get combo pieces. I think one of the interesting things that Marc did in this deck is ensure that the tutors that we have aren't the best tutors around. And I think that that's part of Marc being a bit newer to Magic and only having access to modern cards. Because Demonic Tutor isn't a modern card. Vampiric Tutor isn't a modern card. They've been printed recently and reprinted recently, but they aren't modern cards. So when we're looking at tutors, we have things like Sidisi Undead Vizier. We've got Dig Up out of Crimson Vow, a recent set. These are the tutors that we're including. We've got Diabolic Intent. Technically not a modern card either, but if Marc's got it in his collection, he's got it in his collection. Okay? But it's a great way to ensure that we're using the resources that we have to go and get pieces that make the deck win. All right? So we've got Felice. Felice makes us tokens when we make tokens. Again, perfectly great. It works fine with Smothering Tithe as well, because when we make tokens on other people's turns, we get to make spirits at the end of their turns. These ones are innately evasive as well, so they're going to be able to get punchy, even if Sidar isn't out. Okay, Brood Monitor, combo piece, we covered this at the outset. Grave Titan, combo piece, cover this at the outset. Wormcoil Engine, okay, just a high value floor card. Okay, what that means is that Wormcoil Engine's always going to be good when you play it. It doesn't matter if it works with anything else. It doesn't matter if you got synergy pieces with it. A 6/6 Death Touch lifelink for 6 is always good. If it leaves behind these 2 bodies with it, even better. Absolutely love it. And then Mere Battlesphere. Mere Battlesphere is technically on the same level as Brood Monitor and Grave Titan, in that it makes enough creatures to sacrifice to Nim Deathmantle and Ashnod's Altar to propagate that combo. Not only that, but it's a big beater. Sure, at 7 mana, it tops your mana curve, but it's real good. All right. So overall, the creatures that we have in here, pretty decent the way that they are. All right. I want to take a quick second. Thank everybody for hanging out with us. We got a few of us in chat. Hey fam, good to see everybody. Make sure to check out my sponsors. You can see them all down below. If you're looking for some of the cards that we talk about, if you are looking for altar sleeves or sleeves and deck boxes from Quiver, be sure to check it out. Thanks a lot, fam. All right, and then the rest of the deck is about drawing cards. So we've got Night's Whisper, we've got Sign in Blood. Kaya's Wrath, I think, is a little bit clunky of a Wrath in this deck. We're a 3-color deck, and this has 2 white and 2 black mana investment here. It's a little much for my blood. Okay, Shamanic Revelation, it's another draw spell. Fantastic. You can see that the majority of our sorceries are either win cons, tutors for our win cons, or card drawing effects. Okay, and we've got 2 Wraths. So we've got Kaya's Wrath, we've got Slash the Ranks, destroy all creatures and planeswalkers except for commanders, and Hour of Reckoning, destroy all non-token creatures. Okay, these wipes are a little in conflict with what we want to do. We want our tokens to die because they're going to make Nadier bigger. The bigger Nadier is, the bigger of a bomb we get from Nadier when Nadier eventually ends up leaving the battlefield themselves. All right? So I think Slash the Ranks leaves our commander around but kills all of our tokens. That's great. That's what we want. Hour of Reckoning kills everything but tokens, kills all creatures but tokens. I think that's not exactly what we want to see here in the deck. I would rather replace this with the Vanquish the Horde. So Vanquish the Horde. Oh, thanks for the follow, fam. Vanquish the Horde, new out of Midnight Hunt, costs less for every creature on the battlefield and destroys all creatures. All right, this is the White Blasphemous Act, as it's called. It can cost as low as white to cast, and that's what we want to see here, because if we're behind for whatever reason, if somebody gets a much faster start than we do, maybe we ate a one-sided board wipe, Vanquish the Horde is going to be our best catch-up mechanic for that. So I'd like to see it in over the destroy all non-token permanents. Destroy all non-token creatures, Hour of Reckoning, it's fine, but it's only going to be good if we're ahead, and if we're ahead, especially with tokens, it's not going to matter because Sidar is going to make all of our tokens unblockable to begin with. Now we've got a few blink spells and some removal spells in our instance, and then more draw spells. Village Rites, Deadly Dispute, sacrifice a token, draw some cards. Again, exactly what we want to see. Plumb the Forbidden, exactly the same. Sacrifice a token, draw some stuff. Heroic Intervention, great protection. Sword's best removal. Anguish of the Making, Beast Within, Utter End, all premium removal. I wouldn't touch anything here in our instance. Ephemerate in particular can blink Nadier to make us those elves, and then the following turn blink Nadier again to make us even more elves. It's 1 mana, and I think at the very least it's going to make us 6 tokens with Nadier out. Okay, so I think it's great. All right, artifact-wise, we talked about some of these, but I think the 2 outliers here are Dragon Throne of Tarkir and Eldrazi Monument. Okay, Dragon Throne of Tarkir is another way to go tall as opposed to wide, and that's not what we want to do. Our backup plan is going to be our non-combat win cons, those combos that we talked about, not just making one creature very, very large and getting it through. All right, so I'd like to remove it right away. Okay, Eldrazi Monument is about making all of our creatures big, flying, indestructible, and then sacrificing a creature on every turn. I think that that's fine, but we want to be careful about making our creatures too large to get that Sidar unblockable benefit. Let's take a look at a few more ways to make tokens before we do any of that. Now, along those ephemerate lines, I want to add in 2 cards that blink so that we can do stuff on ETB. There's only a few creatures in the deck that do anything on enters the battlefield, like Brood Monitor or Grave Titan or Mere Battlesphere, but specifically Nadier. Okay? The first is Conjurer's Closet. Conjurers. So Conjurer's Closet is just at the beginning of your end step, you blink a creature you control. All right? I think that that's great baseline value in our deck because it synergizes with our commander, it synergizes with the higher end of our curve, and if it comes down later in the game, we're going to have something out that can work with it, even if it's just Nadier, making us 3 elf tokens a turn. The other is the redundancy for this, and it's Teleportation Circle. So Teleportation Circle is the same thing, but on a white enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, blink, so exile, up to 1 target creature you control, and then return it to the battlefield. Okay? If we do this, again, this is 4 mana and can be making us 3 tokens a turn. I think baseline value, that's exactly what we want. All right? Now let's take a look at some of our other enchantments. Phyrexian Reclamation is getting creatures from our graveyard back to our hand. Honestly, I don't think that there's anything too clutch in our deck that we need to return from the battlefield to our hand, unless it's one of these combo pieces. We now have 3 redundant combo pieces for at least the Nim Deathmantle combo. So I don't think that this is necessary, but it can be good if, we lose something to a board wipe early or we get milled. So, baseline value is there, especially with 24 creatures in the deck. Okay? Cryptolith Rite is now making all of our creatures, tokens included, mana generators, turning them into dorks. Fine at a base level. All right, it conflicts with some of our 2 mana value combo pieces. In here are our Aristocrat pieces. But again, baseline value is there. Dreadhorde Invasion, I'm afraid, is just a little too underwhelming in a deck like this. It's not going to make you that creature token consistently. And so it's just not doing what we want. So I'm ready to cut it. Awakening Zone, again, it's making us a token a turn. It's all right. All right. It is only making us a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi token. At very least, that's mana. And it's something that we can sacrifice on its own. That's important because if we don't have a sack outlet like a Viscera Seer or an Ashnod's Altar in play, we need to find a way to sacrifice these creatures. Okay? Right now, we've got Woe Strider, Viscera Seer, and Ashnod's Altar as our main sack outlets. So Awakening Zone making creatures that can sacrifice themselves is beneficial. Bastion of Remembrance, more redundancy for our Aristocrat pieces. Smothering Tithe makes tokens. Dictative Erebos. So Dictative Erebos and Grave Pact, in particular, are 2 cards that I feel are very oppressive to tables. Okay? Hey, Sean. So I feel that Dictative Erebos and Grave Pact are a little oppressive to tables, especially in an Aristocrat shell. Because you can very quickly lock everybody out of being able to play the game. If you're making an Eldrazi token at the beginning of your upkeep, and you're sacrificing it to make a mana, you're immediately removing at least one creature from each opponent. If you can do that with 3 or 4 creatures a turn, you've got a soft lock on the table. Depending on what your play group likes or dislikes, I would recommend keeping or removing Dictative Erebos. I'd leave it for an upgrade if you're looking to up the power level. In particular, I think that it's not necessary here. We've got enough removal in the deck as it is. We've got enough board wipes in the deck as it is. I would personally remove it. Okay? If your play group is fine with it, fantastic. More power to you. Okay. Molder Vine Reclamation. Whenever a creature you control dies, gain a life and draw a card. Boffo. Okay. We want that. And then Revel in Riches is another win con. All right. We've said that our lands are fantastic. We aren't going to change that. So what do we want to add in? We've got 3 more slots to add in here. All right. In particular, I think that we want to see a few more either ways to protect our stuff or a few more ways to make more tokens, a volume of tokens. Okay. Let's take a look at what our curve looks like. But chat, again, let me know what your favorite ways to make a volume of tokens are in Abzan colors. All right. So looking at our curve here, we've got a ton of 1 and 2 mana value stuff. This is fantastic. Right now our curve is at 3.1. Chef's Kiss, exactly where we want to see it. And we've got, look at all of these 1-drops. Look at these all of these potential 1-drop plays. All right. This deck is going to get off of the ground very, very quickly. When you've got a 5 and a 6 mana value commander, that's good. You want to be able to do things up until the point where you're casting your commanders at 5 and 6. All right. Especially with all of these mana dorks, we're going to be able to jump the 2 mana value and into 3 mana value very fast. All right. Even if on turn 2 we're casting a second 1 mana spell and a 2 mana spell, being able to cast 2 spells a turn as of turn 2, that's fantastic. You're already working twice as quickly as everybody else at the table. All right. So let's take a look at what else we can add in. Our main plan here is to make a lot of tokens, and with a lot of our tokens being nigh unblockable, I want to focus on zombies. One of my favorite ways to make zombies is with Wand of Orcus. So Wand of Orcus is a newer equipment out of Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, especially Adventures in the Forgotten Realms commander set. This 3 mana artifact, black artifact in particular, has an equip cost of 3 and says whenever equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and zombies you control gain death touch until end of turn. Fantastic. Imagine throwing that on Nadier. All right. Then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Huge benefit here with that many zombie tokens. All right. If you get through with a 2/2 equipped with this, unblockable thanks to Nadier, you're making another 2 zombies. If you're able to make it through with a Nadier, or you're able to make it through with a flyer, for instance, that's been pumped, you can be making 3, 4, 5, 6 zombies every combat. And I think that is very strong. Okay. Great recommendation from chat as well. Field of the Dead. So Field of the Dead. Field of the Dead is a colorless land that enters tapped. Taps for colorless. When Field of the Dead or another land enters the battlefield, if you control 7 or more different named lands, create a black zombie. All right. Before we add this, I want to take a look at what our lands look like. Do we have 7 or more different named lands? All right. We've got a ton of non-basics in here, all of which enter untapped and make colored mana. More than 7. That's great. We're lacking land-based ramp, so the most that we're going to get out of Field of the Dead is 1/2/2 a turn. But much like Sloth Bear says in chat, it's a free roll. Basically, it's taking up a land slot. Sure, it enters tapped, but it's 1 of 2 enters the battlefield tapped lands that we have in the deck. I think that it's a great inclusion. Great recommendation. Let's see what we're removing for it. We're tied on mana pips for white and green, and 50% of our pips are black. So we want to make sure that, let's see, let's cut one of our forests here, and we'll add in Field of the Dead. All right, and we'll add in Field of the Dead. So that way we didn't add in another spell. Instead, we kept our lands at 36 and put a land in that's going to synergize with our game plan. Fantastic recommendation. All right, we've got 2 more slots in the deck. What else is making us a volume of creature tokens? All right. Yeah. Curse of Disturbance is all right. Yes, it synergizes with Sidar. Ooh, So whenever the cursed player, is attacked, you and the player that's doing the attacking make a zombie token. That zombie is nigh unblockable if you've got Sidar out, which is fantastic, but it is 3 mana and makes us a 2/2 right away. I think that this is disincentivizing attacking the cursed player rather than incentivizing it, because it's going to make so much benefit to us. We're already getting asymmetrical value out of Sidar making our creatures unblockable. I think that this is one of those cards that says you're getting a little too much heat in this instance. I'd rather one-shot effects or ongoing effects that are able to get us up to the point where we're making multiple creatures a turn. All right. There are a few upgrade options that I'd recommend, a few pricier pieces in particular. I'd love to see a Bitter Blossom in the deck. I'd love to see token doublers in the deck, like Doubling Season, like Parallel Lives. Those all make this deck really, really hum. Call the Coppercoats I really like. So Call the Coppercoats. Call the Coppercoats is a very, very mana efficient option. It's a 3 mana instant with Strive for 1 and a white. So choose any number of target opponents and create a 1/1 human soldier for each creature that opponent controls. Okay, so for 3 mana, you target the person with the most creatures in play, or the opponent with the most creatures in play, and make that many creature tokens. Okay, thanks, Uncle Cardboard. And then you can strive it, so pay an extra 2 to target additional opponents. So if you want to target everybody, it's going to be 7 mana to target 3 opponents with it, 5 to target 2, or 3 to target 1. But it is going to make you a volume of tokens at instant speed, and that's important. Okay, I think that this is a great, great inclusion. All right, if we want to make zombie tokens, what are our options, though? In particular, if we want to make 2/2 zombies, what are we going to do? We can add in something like From Under the Floorboards. Let's say From Under the Floorboards. So From Under the Floorboards, 5 mana to create 3 2/2 tapped black zombies. Okay, and gain 3 life, or we can Madness it. We don't have a lot of ways to discard cards, so I don't think it exactly works. We've got Zombie Apocalypse, and I think that's what I'm talking. No. What's the create 13 zombies? Help me out with this one, chat. What is the create 13 zombies and it's got flashback? Army of the Damned. Thank you very much. Army of the Damned, right? 8 mana, but makes 13 tapped 2/2 zombies, and you can flash it back for 10 mana. All right, that's a lot. It's a lot, but it is a big, splashy spell. Yes, 13 zombies on one spell. If you're looking for an upper end of your curve, something that's just, if this is sitting in your yard and you've got an empty board, it's immediately going to get you back in the game. Okay? If you've got an existing board state and you're able to cast this, it's going to win you the game. Especially because they're going to be nigh unblockable with your commander. I like it. I like it as the very, very top end of the curve, and it's a fun of card as well. So I'm willing to include it in this one. And that brings us to 100 cards in the deck. The deck's right around $475, right? So a decent budget on this one without breaking the bank. We don't have very, very expensive pieces in the deck. The mana base is the most expensive part of the deck. Okay, we've got fetches in here, we've got shock lands in here. I think other than that, Smothering Tithe is one of the most expensive cards in the deck. So I think that this works overall. Let's take a look at our curve. So again, we added a couple of 8 mana value spells, Vanquish the Horde and Army of the Damned. Vanquish the Horde isn't an 8 mana spell, it's a 2 mana spell. So keep that in mind. So our curve is right around 3. Exactly where we want it. Like I mentioned, tons of 1 mana spells to cast. We're going to run a few test hands with this, but I would be surprised if we don't have a 1-drop in the vast majority of our hands. Okay, so let's take a look to see how the deck works. Let's deal our first hand here. We've got a Forest of Plains, a Cryptolith Rite, a Cruel Celebrant. Oops, first hand, no 1-drop. Guess I'm eating crow on that one. We also can't cast our 2-drop, and then we quickly ramp up to 3 and 5 mana on this. I'd throw this hand back. Okay, here's one that I really like. 4 land, a rock, and Adeline in it. This is a good one. This is incredible. Because we also have Plumb the Forbidden, which once we get Adeline out and we start making some humans with that, we can Plumb the Forbidden, sacrificing one of our tokens to draw a card and gain a life. All right, so I think that this one's a keeper. Here we've got 3 lands, Skull Clamp, 1-drop, Sign in Blood, which we can't cast with this mana in particular. Wand of Orcus, though, and a Thalice. This is a risky keep. I would need to see what my top card is in order to keep this, so I would throw it back. Another land, though, probably a keeper. All right, no land in this hand. You hate to see it because there's a Soul Ring. All right, here's 4 land, a 1-drop, a 3-drop. This really doesn't get us much of a board presence, though, so I'm a little iffy on it. 2 land, including a fetch, a 1-drop elf, Nadier's Nightblade, removal. I like this one. Even though it's just 2 land, it's 2 land with a dork, this one's a keeper. Next hand, 3 land, swords, Zulaport Cutthroat, removal. This is basically what we need in order to ensure that we've got a longer game plan with this deck. I like it. I'm a big fan. 1 land, but with a dork and a Viscera Seer, but nothing to cast up to our high end of our curve. Throw this one back. And then I think here's Magical Christmas Land right here. 3 land and a Soul Ring. There's our Nim Deathmantle. So this is a turn 1 Nim Deathmantle. Even though it's just 3 swamps in our hand. We're only making black mana. We aren't able to cast Awakening Zone on 2. But if we luck into any other land, which we don't, but we do end up with a Night's Whisper in a couple of turns, I think this one's good. All right, so we've got a few keepable hands here. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, as usual, is the upgrade. How would I add some more budget into this deck to really run wild with it? So we talked about Dictate of Erebos and Grave Pact. If you want to up the power level and the budget on that, I'd go with those 2 cards. They're a little bit more expensive. I think Grave Pact is up over $30 at this point. Yeah, $30, $29.20, right? Doubling Season is another great addition to any tokens deck, but it's running like over $70 at this point. So that's a big oof. If you want to add it in here, it's just going to make your deck work better and faster, which is what we really want. Okay, and then Parallel Lives. Parallel Lives is another token doubler, $45. It doesn't double the +1/+1 counters like our doubling season would, but Parallel Lives doubles all of the tokens that we make. Basically makes your deck work twice as fast and get twice as much out of it. All right, so there's what I do for the upgrade. Be sure to check out the full deck list, which I'll have linked in the description below. And let me know what you think about the final list. To our viewer Mark, who submitted this list, thank you very much. Let us know in the comments how you've chosen to update this deck. And for everybody that has joined live, thank you very much. If you want to join live, come on out to twitch.tv/CommanderMechanic, and we will see you next week. Thanks, folks. A massive shout out to all of the patrons that support the channel. I could not do this without you. In particular, a special shout out to our Lodestone Golems, Andrew M., Ben Davis, Ben Frayne, Jonathan McManus, and Cameron Scott. And our premium patrons are Metalwork Colossi, Judson Bates, Matt Oakes, Matthew Chandler, Sean Carrier, Timothy Conan, and Wyatt M. Thank you, everyone.